Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Grief to Growth, where we go deep in understanding life's greatest mysteries and navigating through life's challenges. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and whether this is your first time joining us or you've been a longtime listener, I want to welcome you back to the program. Today, we've got Loreli Drache. Actually, I need to ask her to pronounce her last name, but I'll ask her that in a second. Loreli's life is a profound tapestry of near-death experiences, spiritually transformative encounters, and mystical phenomena. She's a galactic, celestial, Sasquatch, dragon, fae, and orb contactee, bringing a wealth of knowledge from her unique and expansive experiences. She's a certified Usui, I believe this, Shiki Ryoho Reiki Master Teacher, a quantum shamanic lotus energy healer, a medical intuitive, a psychic medium, and a spiritual mentor. So you can tell she wears a lot of different hats. She's also trained in traditional Western medicine. She integrates her medical training and her spiritual insights to guide others on their paths. She's also an intuitive joy artist, a channel painter, and a graphic designer, using her creative talents to connect with the divine. So today we're going to go over a lot of topics that you might imagine, including mindfulness, the power of words and emotions, manifestation, and healing through remembrance. We're going to go into the mysteries of the quantum field, Christ consciousness, and body consciousness, and discuss the dreamscape, concurrent lifetimes, and the role of being a divine conduit. That's our challenge, is to get to all that. Afterwards, make sure you go to our community to join in the conversation. It's grieftogrowth.com/community. And with that, I want to welcome Loreli.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you for having me speak to your community. Yeah, as far as my last name is pronounced Drache. It's
Drache,
German.
okay.
Yeah, it's Old Germanic for dragon, which kind of fits if you think about it. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you've got a lot to share with us. So if you could start by telling us about your experiences and how you got to be where you are today.
It's been a long, joyful, yet challenging journey, Brian, to say the least. But from the time I was born, I remember my mother, I mean, even at 5, saying I was an old soul. Like, you couldn't tell me anything. And I always looked for both perspectives, you know, the proverbial term that I'm not fond of, but the devil's advocate, so to speak. Like, well, maybe they meant it this way. Used to drive my mother crazy. But at 7 years old was my first near-death experience. I happened to be, I think, just messing around the kitchen that day when my aunt and uncle came over. We lived on 191 acres in rural Wisconsin. And so it used to be a quarry. So they had dug a lot and hit natural springs. So we had about 5 or 6 natural ponds, some quite large. The one my particular near-death experience is based around was like 30 foot deep. It was the deeper one that we used as a swimming hole. Well, that particular day, it must have been early spring, because my brother and my uncle wanted to go see if the bluegills were spawning, which was on the other half of this pond. So being my mother was cooking supper, she's like, take your sister with you and get her out under my feet. So my aunt, uncle, and I and my older brother, and it's about a mile walk. We walk back there, very forested. So there was 2 entrances to this particular pond, because in the spring, usually when everything melted, it was connected. So this plays into the story here. I wouldn't give all the details, but so my brother and uncle went to check on the spawning and everything. I asked my aunt to go to the deeper end. They had built like a makeshift pier. You know, it had posts and pallets, and it went out about maybe 5 feet or so. There was an incline, and then you go out. And next to that was where the frog pond was. We called it that because all the frogs seemed to breed there. So that was my favorite area. So I asked my aunt to go there, and there's about a pathway, it must have been 30, 40 feet at least, of covered trees between these two ponds. Well, she took me over there. I went down the embankment and was on the platform, while my uncle and brother were at the other entrance. I remember it must have been late afternoon. Yeah, because she was cooking supper. So the sunlight was really coming out and reflecting off the water, and I felt very mesmerized. Like I was worried like I would like fall in for some reason. So I moved to the left side of the pier where the sun wasn't, and I was just standing there looking. At that time, my aunt said, I'm gonna go check on your uncle. She always had like this weird separation anxiety. It's just how they were. They were very connected. She's like, you're gonna be okay. People always balk. A 7-year-old and she left you at the end of the pier. You have to remember we were a farming family. We had responsibilities at a young age. It was a different time,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I'm like, yeah, I'll be okay, go ahead. Um, and the next memory I have, which is very interesting in this fact, is being feet first in the water, thinking, and the water coming up over my face, which is odd because if you fell in, you think about it, you'd be head first, right? So to this day, it's kind of weird for me. And so when I became aware from there to there, the bubbles were just coming up in front of my face, and I realized, oh my God, that's my air. I'm screaming out my air. When I'm out of air, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna drown. But the minute I said I'm going to die, my consciousness left my body. Like instantly, I was gone. That moment of panic, everything. It was instant. And next thing I knew, I was looking above the whole scene, watching my body sink. But it was interesting because then my consciousness like literally moved into my brother first, and he was thinking, can I swim to her faster or can I run? And literally, I am laughing because I'm like, you can't do either. I was just like laughing. I thought it was so like absurd. And so then I'm like, um, and so next, then I went to my uncle. I mean, it seemed chronological yet all at once. You know how these things happen. And so next, I remember connecting with my uncle. She's like, and they were swearing like, oh shit, they're gonna blame us. Oh my God, what do we do? Like, why did you leave her? All these things because they must have heard me fall into my aunt screaming. Because I remember when I rose above, like seeing her look around and see I had fallen in. Um, then I went to her consciousness, um, where she's on the pathway going, oh my God, because I couldn't swim, she couldn't swim, but she's like, I'm closest, I have to try. If I don't do this right, we're both going to drown, you know, um, and all those types of thoughts. And she determined that she could like hang on to the end of the post and try to reach or scoop for my body and maybe get my hair, kind of thing. When I realized, what everybody else was doing, it's like I rose higher. And then I connected with my mom's consciousness back at home. Like I said, why I said it was about a mile. And so I could see the whole neighborhood. And then I was with her consciousness, and she was just wondering if we caught anything, how long we'd be back. She was like chopping vegetables, making, I think it was chili. That was common for her. And as soon as I knew they were all okay, it's like I had to check on them. My next remembrance is being in this space that was all like clouds and mist, is the best way I can describe it. And I sensed there was a being to my left, but I don't remember seeing anybody in this particular experience. I remember off to the left, though, there was like this archway. The light was so bright that I couldn't see exactly. Like I could see the outline of it. And I could tell there was like a being like coming through or out of it. But like it looked like super huge, if I could say this, where I felt like an ant. That's all I know. Like this whole image seemed like really large. And I remember this gets me emotional every time. Like this unbelievable peace and love, like a parental love times 1,000. Like it was nothing I'd ever felt. My family kind of knew how to love, but nothing like this. And in the light, I kept thinking, like, how am I looking at this? What's going on? This should burn my eyes out. It was like looking at the sun. It went from like white to yellow to amber to orange, but it was like huge, picking up this whole presence. uh, I have like vague remembrance of things, like knowing I was being shown things, because I remember what felt like arguing for lifetimes that there was no way they were going to make me go back to that. I'm not going back to that. No way, no how. Like I argued and argued what felt like forever, and like then they'd show me more, and I'm like, no, and so there was this whole thing like, you're not making me leave this beautiful piece. It's not happening. But then it was like almost like I compared to the Truman Show, because that's the only way I can. Everything else felt telepathic, but all of a sudden there's like this big booming voice that encompassed everything. And it was male, and it said, "You must go back. You have more to do." And it was like very powerful, very forceful. And I'm like, yeah.
Mhm.
I also remember like, it's like you don't lose your personality. I've always been stubborn. And I'm like, okay, well, they can make me go back to my body, but they can't make me get in it. Right. But as soon as this voice came through, I'm like, okay, I was at, like, yeah, like I knew there was no more arguing. And so next thing I know, I'm like looking at my body, and they had pulled it up the embankment and laid it on its side. And um I didn't see any ill effects. It's not like I was coughing up water or anything like that. But I didn't feel in my body, and I guess I didn't speak to the next day, like not really. So I thought I was in like maybe like shock, but not shock. Like I just didn't. Um, so they brought me home, all like, oh, she was drunk, apologetic kind of thing. The only thing I remember from that is the next day we had an old Victorian farmhouse. And we had these like Victorian captain's chairs, that would be on each end of a big wooden dining table. And then there was one up against our stairway, and our stairway had a door. So I have a very photographic memory. So this is how I remember things. So I remember sitting there, and I remember having this conversation with my brother. I said, like, why were you thinking that? There's no way you could swim or run. And I mean, I remember him turning white and his jaw dropped, like, there's no way. My body was underwater. How do I know these things?
Mhm.
And I do remember telling my mother like the next day that I died. And it was weird because I swear I relived it all overnight, over and over. I remember that like all of it was coming to me. And so she knew something had happened to me, because no way I knew what she was doing in the kitchen. He was doing that. And I have to speak to this. My family had already had experiences with what they thought were like, uh, and possibly, like ET type galactic experiences and Sasquatch experiences and things, even, and spirit experiences before I was born. So there wasn't as much denial, even though I was raised German Catholic, but kind of loosely by then. Um, so at least I had that support. I don't think I was probably a teenager, um, things rapidly changed. I don't want to skip ahead after that, because, I had this knowing, and I used to as a kid, love Wonder Woman or Lasso of Truth, but like it became where I could see everyone's truth. So like if they weren't truthful to me, I had no filter. I'm 7. I would just be like, that's not true. Or just like be whatever, and call them out, or like, you're not paying, like I
Mhm.
didn't know any better. My mother kept having to go, honey, you can't say that, like, but you said that, like I had no filter. So it
Mhm.
took me a long time to learn discernment. And I started to have prophetic dreams. I think the most disturbing, I think, especially for my age at the time, is I came back sensing when souls were leaving. And it was always like 2 weeks before I'd get totally like ill. And they'd look like, like the best I can compare it to is like wax dummies. Like you could tell they were there. They were glossy and almost melty looking. You could tell the spirit in their energy was preparing to leave. And that was very frightening for a child. Like, these people are melting, mom. And I have to laugh about it now because, young me, I feel for her.
Mhm.
But yeah, and it happened with my grandfather died about right around that time, and I'm not sure if it was before or after, but I think a lot of my near death was maybe preparing me for that, because he was the only person who validated me and really seemed to care for me at that point in my life. So maybe that understanding, was there to help me. But the abilities were quite confusing. my mother was very supportive, and it got where people like would really listen. Like at first she would filter it, not trying to call me out, just say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this, or are you okay? Because I would sense when people weren't doing well. Um, but as I got older, I spoke for myself, and there were times like my sister didn't take a trip because I said there's some reason you're not supposed to fly, don't go. So I had that kind of support. But it was almost like I always say this, like I'm a timeline transplant, because I remember having a pretty good childhood, but when I returned, it was kind of like I didn't fit in. My brothers would call me the milkman's kid. They became very abusive, very jealous. There was just a lot of that
Hmm.
uh, going on after. And I didn't fit in with my family anymore. I mean, they were hunters, farmers, and I couldn't stand the thought of death. I'd put a fly outside, all of these kind of things. So maybe they felt judged. I'm not sure. In my 20s is when kind of the first medical intuitive type stuff, that's when I went to go to school for it, started to show. And I remember a few instances, with the doctors I worked with, like I'd come out of the room from the patient and be like, like for instance, there was like a 5-year-old girl, and I came out. They were just thinking she had a strong stomach ache, and I came out and said, "This girl, it's her appendix. I don't know why, but it's the appendix." The doctor kind of scuffed at me, and then he went in and he came out like my brother. Why does it go? Kind of his jaw dropped. He's like, "How did you know that? I would have missed that. She needs to go to the ER right now. Get her paperwork ready."
Hmm.
So those kind of things were a lot of responsibility if you think about it for a young person.
Hmm.
Mm. So that was a very interesting journey. Classmates and everyone would be like, "You're weird, but in a good way." They just didn't know how to get me, and neither did I.
Yeah.
I just knew things and could sense people's emotions. So I was always saying like the what you might call the right thing or the supportive thing, even not knowing what was going on
Hmm.
from them. So it made me a little weird, so to speak. But yeah, if I can continue if you like. The other experiences, but
Yeah, that'd be great. Please.
okay. Um, well, I had some prophetic dreams about that I would get married and have children, and I eventually this leads to that. My husband is the one I met at 4 years old and had this weird soul connection with. I
Hmm.
remember the day I met him at 4. I was at the Kenosha County Fairgrounds, and we were just staring at each other, and it was just like this weird locking moment in time. And we didn't really meet up too much again until we were like 17. Dated there, but by the time we met and became a couple was at 27. Um, and oh, excuse me, 23. Forgive me. 27 is when we decided to get married.
Hmm.
And at 28, and I finally, after years of trying, because I never wanted to get married unless I could have kids. I didn't think it was right to marry someone. It was just this weird thing, like if I couldn't give them a family if they wanted a family. And I finally had gotten pregnant after years of trying. What I had this my grandmother had passed by then, and she came to me in what I would call a visitation dream or a visitation. And she showed me in the clinic that I normally went to, with a calendar on the wall with the date. And she said, "This baby is not yours to keep. I'm so sorry. There'll be more, but there's a reason for this. Just know that you will be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And then, like I said, she pointed out uh, the date. I think it was February 27th on the calendar. Um, and yes, we got married in January. And by then I was already showing signs I had to get hormone replacements. And indeed, February 27th, I went into the emergency room. They performed an emergency DNC, and without knowing anything about me, because I'm very sensitive to meds and everything, they gave me too much anesthesia.
Hmm.
And we didn't realize I was highly anemic at the time. So, sorry. So I lost a lot of blood and I quit breathing and
Hmm.
had to be incubated. And the doctor, it was actually a doctor I worked with, said he almost lost me. He was very mad the next day, let's just say, that the other doctor, waited so long and that I ended up in the ER and everything else. Um, there isn't a lot of remembrance with this one, other than I had the same after effects, and I later learned in subsequent ones that I went home for healing to have these children that I was shown in these previous prophetic dreams,
Mm.
um, and that I have remembrance of like being in this like healing room with these beings. But at the time, I didn't come back with that remembrance. I just knew something had happened. Even my family was weird because I was so calm about it. And I'm like, this is how it's supposed to be. Everything's okay. Like I was calming everybody else. In fact, I
Wow.
had a big one of those, home parties scheduled that night, and everybody was shocked. I'm like, I don't need to cancel that. Like I was okay with it. My husband, on the other hand, had a lot of guilt and a lot of different things, and he did not handle it well. We had to actually wait when they were trying to discharge me from the hospital the next day. And this is why the doctor was so stressed. There was another woman in distress who almost lost her baby. And she had finally delivered. So everybody was rushing because it was an emergency because of all of the things that happened. So we heard the new baby scream. And that's when my husband really broke down.
Mhm.
Like I said, I was all okay with it. It's like I knew about her. I knew everything that was going on. It was really surreal time. Um, but the knowing I came away with was like it was my body resetting and learning how to have a baby. And basically, the autopsy proved the same thing. My doctor said to me, "Your body was figuring out how to make a baby. The systems didn't interconnect, and that's why her heartbeat had stopped."
Mm.
And he said, like, if you want to have another baby, you need to have it now, and that's exactly what we tried to do. And that's where I had the rainbow baby I had seen in the vision I had had. I had my son, which is a lot to get into, even with that, because with each of my children, and even with him, I had pre-birth communication with them.
Wow.
He told me he would be born with the cord wrapped around his neck twice, and if I pushed, he would die. And I'm pretty sure just because of his abilities, I think he had like a near death in the womb, like that. He came out like purple blue. They had to, revive him and everything. I didn't push because that would. So I followed all the instructions. Because the doctor's like, hold up. I'm like, yeah, I can't push. Like I knew. It always freaked my doctor out. In fact, I knew every time, like within a few days, that I was pregnant. Like I sensed them. So my doctor got where he just trusted me. If she says she's pregnant, just give her time. She's fine. So they monitored me really close. And for my daughter, the same thing. She showed me that, like, if I didn't push, they would have to do emergency DNC. Emergency C-section and everything else. And knowing my anesthesia and everything else, like, that was dangerous for us both. Because she almost got trapped. She came out posterior. The other one said she'd come quickly. Like the nurse didn't believe me, and I was like, she's there, she's coming now. And the doctor barely got his clothes on. So like each one communicated with me. So it was a beautiful experience that way. So everything turned out as it should, as far as and they all are experiencers and are have lots of abilities, and thank me for being the mother that they have
Wow.
that would support that. So I have a very strange family. We're all experiencers. Of one kind or another, but we've all had at least one near-death experience. Um, out of 5 people, yeah, so that's a little weird. Um, as far as after that, my next uh, experience, I'm trying to remember which came first, because I did have it was right around the same time. I had a very strange experience where, almost like some people would say, it was a walk-in or a change. Um, I was laying on our futon watching a show that day, and I was laying there, and all of a sudden, in my vision, I was seeing the honeycomb grid. At the time, I didn't know what the heck that was, and then I was seeing all these like energy waves going up, like all of these weird patterns. I think they were like blue and pink, and then all of a sudden, like I could not make him go away. I didn't know what this was, and I was freaking out. And then I realized I couldn't lift my body. It was like dead weight, especially my arm. Like I first started with my arm, and then I couldn't lift my body at all. And I'm sitting there. I was able to get out to my husband, like, something's wrong, like I couldn't even move, and I was just seeing all of these grids. so he took me to the hospital. I ran so many tests after this. It took me 2 hours because that was the weird thing. I could not remember who I was, where I was. I didn't even know my own name. It took me over 2 hours for them to get me to say, I think my name is Lori. That's my legal name.
Mhm.
And but I couldn't relate to anything or anything. Like the memories came back, but there wasn't like emotional attachment to anything, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
some of the memories didn't come back, like I don't really remember. I remember brief things of raising my children, but like nothing. They checked, the heart, the carotid, the brain, everything. They couldn't find a reason for it whatsoever. There was nothing. I remember it was a very stressful time by then, and I think at this time I had lost my mother. My husband had a nervous breakdown over that. They were very close. It was the only mother figure he had. So like there was a lot of stress, and I remember just wanting to escape. So I don't know if
Mm.
that, some people say that sometimes different aspect of your soul step in when that happens. Um, so it was like I said, they never found a medical reason. They tried to say maybe it was a complicated migraine or a TIA, but there was no evidence of anything. They didn't know, and I had no further ones like that after that. I
Mhm.
have seen the grid since, but no other like not being able to move my body or anything. And then my third death experience, I had lost blood flow through to my brain. My husband and daughter were there when this happened. She was probably maybe 7, so this is about 30. Yeah, she was about 6 or 7. Yeah, because I was about 36. And anyway, I staggered back like 5 or 6 feet. I don't have any memory of that. I just remember like starting to blank out, going, "What's going on?" Like everything was blanking out. And I stumbled. My husband said like 5 or 6 feet into the front door. I fell back against the door jamb.
Mhm.
Um, and he said I seizured. I looked like I seizured, and then I slumped over like I was dead, and he didn't see me breathing. And then he was freaking out. So I'm there slumped over, but I was instantly gone to what I call Heaven City. I was with a being that's looked like my mother, but I remember going like she didn't have the same energy. I'm like, you're not my mom, and they seemed very contrite and like they were surprised I recognized that energetically. And they're like, we just I got the telepathic, the weird understanding, like it was just to keep you calm, and someone you could connect with.
Mm.
um and I remember this time I did see like a body. I remember seeing my legs, and I remember sitting on this like marble type bench. But there was the mist again. Like I just remembered the mist. It's almost like I don't know if they put that there so you don't remember the rest, but I remember being on this bench talking to this being, and um they were very comforting, like a mother figure, and I remember she was rubbing my leg, and she was like, it's okay, you've done enough. You can
Mm.
stay now. You've done enough. And I remember getting like like the intuitive knowing, like I had put in a positive balance, I could stay. And I remember freaking out, going, no, I got to get back to my daughter. I had to be there for my daughter. I had other kids, but there was this remembrance prior and during this of another life where I had died on her at the same age.
Mm.
I was a cobbler. It looked like 1800s London, and it was like the cobblestone bridge, and my shop was on one side, but then people like lived on the other side. And it was dusk, and I was coming home. So I had, my money pouch from the day and all of that. And two guys came out of the shadows of the trees at the other end of the bridge and stopped me. And they demanded my coin purse and whatnot. And I remember giving it to them. Um, and the one had like a musket ball type, handgun,
Mhm.
at me. And he's the one who got greedy. He's like, no, I want your pocket watch too, because you could see the chain. I remember that. And the other guy's, no, no, let's just go. We got the money, kind of thing. And was grabbing at him. Well, those guns are hair trigger. And it went off and shot me like right under the right ribs. And this is significant in a second. But um and then they were like freaking out, and oh my God, like they didn't mean to, kind of thing. And they ran away, and I made my way home. My house like two after this bridge. And I remember coming in and like collapsing in my wife's arms. My daughter, my oldest daughter, was my daughter then, same age.
Mm. Mm.
And I had died in my wife's arms. I remember telling her, my wife, that I loved her, and sorry to my daughter. And my daughter does have some memories of how they struggled afterwards and lived on the wharf, and I had to do things on the docks and things, because in that day and age, the man was the one who cared for everything.
Right.
So, and I don't know, it seems like everything at once. Like, I don't know if the decision to come back for her out of love and not doing that, same trauma to her soul again was part of the reason that I got to come back, or what. It kind of all seemed blended. Um, but the significant thing is, when I was born into this life, I had a pain there. Like my whole life, it would make me collapse. Same thing, tons of testing, no reason for it. I later found like I have a slight narrowing there, but not quite there. So I always had that pain, and when I had this understanding and forgiveness, I hadn't had it since. You know
Mm.
what I mean? That I had forgiven that lifetime, that wound.
Mm.
So that's
Mm.
very significant in that. And that's a lot of the work I do now, is helping people, let go of some of these things that are carry over cellular memory. Um, my next experience was actually a connection to Christ consciousness in 2019. I started getting like knowings, and almost like channeling in a voice, that said, I'm Yeshua, don't call me Jesus, you're equal to me, I'm your brother, you can do what I can do. All these type of things that were totally against my Catholic upbringing.
Right.
um so this particular day, um I was sensing this, and the need to get outside, and the need to ground. And I wasn't even really aware of grounding at the time. The moment I stepped outside, I call it like the Lucy moment, like the movie. Like, all of a sudden, I got all these knowings, and all this stuff was coming to me about how I've been with Earth since it was a thought form, and how, Eden's always been here, but it was our choices and our free will, and it was a fall from frequency. And they were showing the Earth as like this magma, and how it turned and became a planet, and all of this stuff, like all these images, like super, super fast. And and I literally, that's what the Lucy moment comes in, because I was like, no, no, stop. I felt like I was gonna become one with everything. Like, I was losing my own identity, because
Mm.
there was all this information. And so then it came through more as like feelings and energy, and being shown, like I said, my accountability in it all, but almost not like a collective accountability of all the free will choices we made to where we are now. And I remember just ugly crying, going, I'm so sorry, I forgot who I was, I'm so sorry. I mean, I was ugly crying and begging the universe for forgiveness. And then there was these, like, it's like I've started to become and feel everything. There's these three huge trees at the end of my driveway. And it was like they were showing me everything. And I remember calling them, and I still do, the Sentinels, which is really interesting. That's the name, the Sentinels. And and I just remember, like I said, this complete connectiveness, and I felt like all the pain of these and suffering of all these choices, and that's where I was really like lost in emotion. And I remember then, it was very odd to me now, but I do it more now. But at the time, I had never done this. I started singing, and almost like, I do have Norse heritage. The closest thing I could find is like how the Sami thing, and it was all these vocalizations and all of these things. But I felt like it was like healing me, putting protection, and like healing the land, like I was putting it out into the universe. And that must have went on for like, it felt like at least 20 minutes of this thing, like this energy just pouring out of me. And then I remember like almost coming to, and I was just standing there with my arms down with my hands up and just in this complete thing. And I didn't know really what had happened to me, but it was almost a validation because when I came back inside, like I said, my daughter's very intuitive. She's had two NDEs and everything else. And she was like, who are you? You're not my mother. This isn't you. What
Hmm.
happened? And I was like, I'm like, I said, I just, like, I was like almost speechless, like, not that, and I tried to explain to her what happened, but I think it was almost like a purification of my energy as well.
Hmm.
And from there, like, much more things started to happen, and my abilities grew exponentially, especially then. I was called to get attuned to Reiki, and that just blew my medical intuitive way out there, right? Like I could hear the organs speak to me. They had voices, they had personality, they literally were their own energy agreements, living beings inside the body. So that was very profound for me. Like, oh my God, they have their own consciousness. I never speak to my body. I don't think of my body. Um, which brings me also to something of my fourth death experience. But in between there, I during this, I understood that I was supposed to speak the truth of creation and all these other things. But I was like, I'm the most extroverted introvert you'd ever think of. I purposely became a hermit when I moved here. I'm not even on GPS. Okay. Like I'm like, and they're telling me I'm supposed to speak my truth, and talk about these things wherever. And all these other things that were given to me during this experience. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Well, like I said about my change in frequency and things started to manifest super fast. Like something I would say would happen the next day, sometimes a half hour, depending how big it was. But it became so obvious. My husband's like, "Stop that!" Especially with animals. Like I said, I wanted the this kind of cat or that kind of cat, and they literally would show up at the door, standing on their hind legs, knocking with their paw. Like it
Wow.
got to be obvious. My family's like, "Mom, watch what you say." Well, along with this, um, Ned Matina runs a large NDE group, and somebody had posted in it. This is 2021. Was my fourth death experience. Somebody had posted in it that they posted a meme about lame ways we died. So people were saying, next time I want to do this, next time I do that. Well, I made this joke that I wanted to go like grandpa, not the passengers in his car. Are you familiar with the joke?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Grandpa died in his sleep. Right.
yeah.
Well, not even a week later, I had, and I did have some things leading up to this, some autonomic nervous system issues where like I was glitching. Like one moment I couldn't move or I couldn't swallow or even couldn't breathe. It was some weird things because I had a lot of autoimmune issues. Anyway, so not even a week later, um, I even said like I wasn't feeling right when I went to bed that night. I stopped breathing in my sleep. Um, and my first awareness was that I was in this cloudy space. There was no light or no portal this time.
Hmm.
It was like my soul family, like the people that I knew that were still alive showed in that form. So like I knew my husband and daughter were over here. But the main beings was someone that is like my twin flame soul connection. And I've had that validated by other shamans. And he was in front of me. And a friend I had made when I moved here was over here. They play a significant kind of role in this, but it was like a simultaneous thing. I'm getting like a lecture. I call it like getting called to the principal's office by my twin flame saying like at your level of light, like my high frequency, I had to be careful what I say, what I put into the universe because it'll happen like that. I have this whole lecture going on of at your level of light, you can't do this. What are you doing? And I remember saying, well, human means a dit. I don't remember once I'm there. I literally said that, which is kind of funny, and I remember them like just not finding it humorous,
Right,
but
right.
like, right. And meanwhile, the other woman was saying like, if you want your body, you have to get back in it now, and we called my body a vehicle, which was interesting. And she's like, you have to get back in it now. I'm like, I don't know how. She's like, just slide into it. You have to make your body swallow, which was interesting because I later met a friend, her NDE, she was told to swallow too to restart her body, which is,
Hmm.
so I don't know what this is, but I was told I had to swallow. So I remember doing that. And as soon as I took that swallow, it was like this huge gasp there, like that. And I remember, and then like, it was like a horse kick to the chest when my heart started. I mean, it hurt so bad. I can't even, yeah, I can't relate it to anything. And and then she's like, okay, now do a systems check. I'm like, you're like, what the hell is this? She's like, move the energy up. Feel your toes. Can you feel your toes? I'm like, no. She's like, well, move the energy, move it in. Come on. Like she was like walking me through this. And as the energy like came back to my body and I was making it, I don't know how, like making it move up through my body. And I just remember that was like the worst pain imaginable. It's like having your arm asleep, but your
Mm-hmm.
whole body like that, all your nerves trying to come on. It was horrendous. Like I never want to go through that again. Horrendous. And but that's the only way I can describe it. And it was so painful. I mean, it didn't last long, but longer than I wanted to. Okay. And yeah, that was terrible. And they're like, okay, can you move now? And I'm like, yeah, like, and I'm like, and I remember like being half in, half out. I'm like, how do I get in this thing? I got it going. How do I get in? And and so it did take me a little bit as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and this from a medical perspective, I think is more like shock. I shook. My whole body shook like almost seizure like for 20 minutes. That I do remember because you know, it yeah, that was at least a good 20 minutes. I mean, like, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, and I was kind of trying to deny it in my own way, like, oh no, that didn't happen. Maybe that's just magic, everything. Um, but like I said, I remembered, and I can get into this, and a lot came through afterwards, about the power of thought, words, emotion, and how they play into creation. But it was interesting because the validation I got, that particular woman in real time told me that she had had a dream or a vision that she saw me dead laying in my bed. And my twin flame said, I know something happened to you last night. He's like, he goes, you died or something. Like, I felt your energy leave because he's very sensitive to my energy. He even, like, if I'm hurting on the right side or I hurt my right shoulder, he'll feel it in his left. Like, he's very connected to me this way. He's like, you left the venue. He's like, what
Mm.
happened? He goes, and I remember this whole thing. He's like, I had to run you through some tests. What was this test? And I do remember, mind you, that there was a test, but I had no idea about what it was. And he said I had to like he had to drink from my body or something. It was very bizarre. He's like, something happened, and I've heard of that, I think, through other NGEs. And so it only confirmed for me, like, oh my God, this really did happen. You know, it's like I don't know, for some reason, and like, even though I've had all these experiences, I try really hard to deny them. Like, this couldn't possibly happen. This didn't happen to me. I didn't die again. Um, so I just remember that, and there was this agreement, like, okay, you said in 2019 we gave you all this information, and you were supposed to go back and you were supposed to talk about it. You didn't. Like, if you want to go back, you need to start speaking. You need to do all these things. They showed me all of these things that were to come, and it kept filtering in of like what I was supposed to do and the things that would happen and the platforms I would be speaking on and everything else. They're like, this is why you're going back. If you agree to this, you can go back. So there was
Mm.
all these layers to this experience. So I started writing more in the NTED group, and I wrote this whole thing about you don't have to die to live, 10 things I would tell younger me. And my daughter told me to post it there that somebody needed it. Well, it went kind of like mini viral, like 1,000 shares. And that's when Jeff Mara saw me and some other people, so I did my first podcast December 31st. 2001. So that's how I
Mm.
can kind of date and manage it, because this NDE was January 2021. So it took me till December to like really get myself like kind of going.
Sure.
Um, and so then I was much more mindful of my words. What I understood was like, and some people argue with me that it has to be the emotion behind the words, but they showed me in my case, like what I write, what I say, matters, and that everything has a frequency. And as a collective, we've fed certain words these energies, and they mean certain things. So when you use them, you're also adding that energy, the collective energy, into it. And the other thing was that they told me that like, my voice carries frequencies, and I was bringing back healing frequencies and light codes. That I have all these agreements to work with and do work with.
Mhm.
And so for a while there, I was like really, really like almost, I don't want to say paranoid, but like watching what I say and how I put things into the ring. And then I became more aware of how words are used, because, think about it, even like when we're celebrating stuff, we're like, you're really killing it. Think about that, right?
Right.
And like we say good morning, but if you look at the root of morning, it means to mourn the day.
Mm.
All of these things. So I always say good day, but I'm saying like just to switch my mind to be more mindful, because the more I understood, the more we raise our vibration, the more mindful we do need to be of how we're expressing ourselves in the universe. Words can be a blessing or a curse, as somebody would tell. There's a reason it's called spelling, all of these things, because everything is frequency. But there's a collective frequency words carry. So I think too, that's why they kept giving me new words to call things. Like that's why I say I'm a divine conduit. That's the word that they gave me in a remembrance guide. I have to sometimes use these other labels just to, make other people understand what I do. But
Hmm.
there was a lot of that. One of the major experiences I had that expanded my gifts was I was like, I don't know if it was an out of body exactly, but I was shown this being in at the time I wasn't attached to it, but it was like another version of me laying in this hospital dying. And then there was this big, beautiful, I would just call her a goddess, like these red wings and these ornate gold highlights and gold in her wings and gold things on her. And I remember her saying like, and the understanding of her saying like, these abilities are now yours. You asked for these. And she used the term witch, and I freaked out. She's like, no, 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 not what your people think witch is. She's like, these are your like your divine abilities of
Hmm.
being able to alchemize energy and know how energy works and how to use energy and everything else. And she came through this big violet Merkaba, like into this timeline, and like I felt this whole energetic, I would call it an energetic overlay, move into me. And that's when a lot of the other things expanded, of being able to use portals and vortexes and what I call being able to see other timelines or connect them through what a lot of NTEers talk about, tunnels and things.
Hmm.
Well, that's what I would see, is these tunnels connecting, and I would be able to connect these consciousnesses and be able to speak to them in like real time. Like if you, let's say you have what you call a past life as the German poet. I don't know why that's just what I was called to say. And I would be able to like open this thing where you're in the same space and time.
Mm.
So like his knowings and abilities would be able to connect with you, or that we're trying to connect with you. I'd be able to see like, and often, it was kind of funny because it's like talking to ancestors. They're like, oh, he gets that for me. He gets that ability for me. Like they were so happy to see like their knowledge had carried over, you know.
Mm.
So that was a very profound thing. And I've never really talked about that in a podcast, but I was really called to tell you about that. Because we don't realize the interconnectedness. They show it to me like a spider web of all these lights. We're just this little fractal of all of that. And what I see in the work I do is this, like what I call initial incarnation wound, because you think you go being this mighty thing into like this genie into a lamp. So you forget that you're all and everything, and there's a lot of wounds I've seen with that, like of disconnection, that separation and everything. So being able to reconnect everyone with like all that they've ever been was so healing for so many people,
Yeah.
and being able to see that. So I thought I was done with a lot of this. I mean, there's so many other experiences I could get into after that. There's so much, but
Hmm.
I thought I was done. And then it was kind of strange because it's like my family sensed it. 'Cause my kids are like, this last December 19th, the week prior to that, my kids are like, Mom, how would we handle the house? How would we do these? What are we going to do if something happens to you? Like they were sensing it. Um, I had another autonomic, and this I was bad. I ate something. I'm very sensitive to MSG, and sometimes they list it as natural flavors and other things. So I accidentally ate something that had MSG, and I knew it because I was like getting numbness and weird twitches and everything else. Well, it triggered the autonomic again, and I quit breathing in my sleep. Um, but this one was strange. The first time I went somewhere where like there was nothing. It was this huge void. It was like this black expanse of velvety, like you felt loved and at peace and just like held, almost like being in the womb, I want to say.
Hmm.
But it was expansive. And I remember thinking, well, where am I? Oh my God. Like, did I die again? Like, oh God, what? This isn't right. Why am I here? Why am I seeing this? And I'm like, did I die again? And I'm like, where's my body? And as soon as I asked those things, you know, um, my body was available to me. And I went through a similar process as the fourth. But this time my heart was like 8 times. And I literally thought I was having an infarction. but but I remember like having this conversation, and this voice said to me, like, because I'm like, why did I have this? I thought I was done with this. Aren't I doing everything you told me? Like all this
Right.
stuff. And there was this voice, and it said to me, and I realized, I had attached to this. The voice said to me, there is only death because you still believe in it. Like I kept recreating these death things, thinking that was the only way home, the only way to be at peace, the only way to feel connected.
Hmm.
And it was like, you don't have to die to be home, and you don't have to create death to do so.
Hmm.
And it was all like a you as a collective you, like stop creating death in this experience, and that was very profound for me. Because it made me see like, yeah, I truly believe like to be at one with creation, I had to die. And that wasn't true. And I didn't have to age my body. I didn't have to put it through all these struggles and illness and disorders and all of this, what we think is a natural progression. It was
Hmm.
never meant to be that way. All of this understanding. So that was like a huge aha moment for me. Prior to this, too, I was having some health struggles that return that I just want to speak to this, because I think it's also very important. Um, I was very angry. I'm like, you asked me to be of service. So, why aren't you healing me? I have to heal this in order to be of service. I was really kind of cursing.
Yeah.
And I was like talking to Archangel Michael, and he like pulled me out of body, and he was like, I can't remove what you've already pulled into your experience, i.e., from the quantum field, right? Um, I can only remove your attachment to it so it moves through your experience faster. And then it was like all these reels playing out of all the times I had attached to things and made them bigger than they needed to be in my experience.
Hmm.
Like there are things that we plan in our experience, because how it was shown and described to me, it's like, well, you agreed to have this, but whether it was a cold or pneumonia was all how much energy you fed it and chose to experience it, that particular thing in your plan. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, it's like it was the whole duh face palm kind of moment. Like
Yeah.
I realized how I had created so much of that, because especially having medical knowledge, I would freak out. I had like medical anxiety, like, oh my God, this could happen, that could happen, this could, and all of these things the minute something would go wrong. But also I realized at the same time as well of other things, like whether they were good or bad, like we want to judge that when they're just an experience. But, how I pulled things into my experience, that whole, as my friend Colleen likes to say, a manifestation. She's got her own word for it.
Yeah.
Of like how much energy do we put into the good things? Because we tend as a society and conditioning to worry, but how much do we project and put into what we do want to experience? Like,
Yeah.
and part of this whole manifestation thing that I learned was in the word of creation, there's all these boxes of potentiality. So when you like try to control rather than surrender to the divine flow, you're cutting all these potentialities off for you to experience. Like, I want a red truck, it has to have big tires, and it needs to be a Ford, and it needs to be this. You're cutting off all the potentiality of having something you may want. I want a house in Malibu. Well, maybe you weren't meant to have that house in Malibu, but you're supposed to have a nice place in Colorado, but we think we know better, right? So, there was some of that realization too. Like, the more I surrendered to the divine flow, the more I was in abundance, and the more things that loving, positive experiences would come into my life. But every time I tried to control it, that's where I created suffering. So it was very
Interesting. Yeah.
profound for me. But those are kind of like my general experiences. I didn't get into all the contactee stuff in my younger years, but yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I have so many questions. Um, One is you mentioned your twin flame, and you mentioned in the one experience you saw your twin flame. Is that your husband, your twin
No,
flame? Oh, it's not. Okay.
no, I've had many lifetimes. I was told, and even quantum hypnosis with my husband and daughter, and that we come as like a trinity, like we're like
Okay.
the same part of the same oversoul, but we each have a different purpose that we incarnate multiple times. But so I work very well with my husband, but
Mhm.
and he and it's weird because him and my twin flame also have very different, very similar like spiritual experiences. So I don't know if they are the same soul as well, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so I was going to ask you, but I think you kind of answered this because it sounds like you keep going home. You keep going back. And I've known a few people that have that experience, but I think you said you were calling that to yourself because you thought that was the way to maybe reset or something. Is that true?
Yeah, that's how I kind of, by the last experience, understood it. Like, stop creating death in your experience.
Hmm.
And it's interesting too, because in an angel meditation and different angel contact that I have had, there was an IANS workshop about angels my friend ran, and Archangel Samael, who people know as the angel of death and various things, kept appearing to me, and he even came to me in experience, like, you can't keep like outrunning death in this weird sense of like, because I've had all these experiences that have shown me, like, I keep transferring rather than like parts of me going home, I keep transferring these abilities to different lifetimes. And I think that's what he meant in the fact that, like, um in that sense, because it was really hard for me to understand this as far as that, but maybe he meant because I keep coming back from my experience. Like, I keep making these deals and different things of like, to be of service.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure, but it was, oh, I know what it was. Sorry, forgive me. Part of it was that, and somebody even pointed out this to me, that I work more with the dead than the living. Like,
Mm.
I can see the past, present, future, like the whole aspect, the 360 views of things. So I've done a lot of what you call timeline work or readjusting, because they've even shown me this. And I don't get into a lot of this, but adjusting timelines for the highest good, like my consciousness going and making like a more loving choice in that timeline than I originally would. And I've been shown like each time we do that, each time we ascend to our highest timeline, it's like a ladder. We're pulling each of them forward and expanding like our oversoul as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was some of that going on, like like alternating things and things. It's like you can't keep doing that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of timelines, because you mentioned past lives, and I've heard people say that there is no time, and
Right.
that our lives are actually parallel as opposed to
Yes.
past. What are your thoughts on that?
I very much subscribe to that because when you get to a certain level of consciousness, like you can connect with all of those and know their abilities and know different things about them. And even working with clients, I can see how these different things are affecting them, or the different skills that they brought forward from their oversoul. Because what I mean by oversoul is like the first fractalization of their soul that became other personality complexes to experience various lives, like I say, all at once, and
Mm-hmm.
different ones. And they've shown me like 3 to 4 personality complex will come into one particular lifetime for things they want to work on, and even switch out sometimes. Like I can sense when a new one is coming in because their abilities will help me get through the next chapter of things.
Yeah.
So we're always this huge network of aspects of ourselves is what I see. And it all is going on, like I told you, like a spider web all at once, like a multiverse, some people call it.
Right.
uh, but I've definitely had multiverse experience. So I would say that it's all available energetically at once. Like people are like, I don't want to reincarnate. I'm like, you don't get it. Y'all go home when you graduate. That's why you want to bring them all forward. Like it's not that you're going to keep coming back, at least in the phase of that timing. It's a blink for all of them. you know,
Yeah,
that's my experience with it.
yeah, I think that's a concept that might be new to a lot of people. That I'm just coming into. Is like we're not, we think of ourselves as an individual, but we're actually part of a collective. Even as Brian, I'm part of a personality group that's part of an oversoul, that we're not as individual as we think we are. So it's a mind-blowing concept.
It is. I mean, it took me a lot when they were giving me all this information. I'm going, what? you know, and it's interesting because my particular team, one of them, it was Sabrina. She's a grid worker, and that's why I see so much grid work stuff.
Hmm.
Bringing in the new Violet grid and everything else. But so all the information, like I was getting, I believe through her, was in very simulation terms and very energetic computer, like phase lock, fiber optic, download, source code, like a lot of stuff. Like one of my experiences was just seeing the whole source code in, I think that was after that whole thing with the Merkaba.
Hmm.
All these source codes started just pouring out. And I even came to when it was happening, and they're like, just relax, stay calm. We got to finish up with this. Like literally. And it was all these numbers like 00 something, 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 something. And they were like, they looked like literally like source did. Like they were white with a glowing like amber around them. And it was almost like, the Wheel of Fortune, but different, like the wheel just
Right.
told me like, all these numbers just in front of my face. And I'm just sitting there, like by then I got not used to it, but I knew some crazy things have happened. So I was like, okay, whatever. But I understood like each of us carries different codes that activate another person or for other people or for ourselves, and to activate what I call the divine DNA, but people call it like the junk DNA and everything else that I call our birthright, that gives us and remind, this ability to be multi um, dimensional and have what I call our birthright back of these abilities of, that people call clairs. I
Hmm.
have all my clairs. They're various in strength depending upon what I'm working with or what I need at the time.
Hmm.
But I think that's available to everyone. It's just the remembrance, the ability to expand the mind. The mind controls the reality, of having that awareness. As each thing happened to me, the more it expanded to the point where I was like, and I couldn't deny anybody else's experience because mine sounded just far fetched, and they really spoke to me about sovereignty. Like each person creates their own timeline, their own experiences. So for you, it might be a red shoe, somebody else is the blue shoe, but you still have the same backdrop.
Hmm.
and their energy agreements is what keeps it interweaving. Like you and I today, our timelines align because we agreed to do this, you
Hmm.
know, kind of thing. And so it wasn't my job to save anyone. It wasn't my job to make people remember or any of these things, only to tell the truth of my experience so other people had an awareness of what they could be creating and experiencing for themselves to expand their experience. That was it.
Yeah.
That was the truth of it in why they wanted me to speak, because so much of our suffering comes from feeling like that trapped genie,
Yeah.
like this is all there is and this is all I am, and it doesn't feel right, or this doesn't feel like home. That's because there's this multi-dimensional being wanting to go back and explore. And the only time it gets to is when your conscious mind shuts down enough and your subconscious can take you on all these astral trips and all these other places to experience, because your conscious mind won't allow it.
Yeah. Let's talk about manifestation a little bit, because I heard you say, like, if we hold on to something too tightly and try to control it, then that doesn't work. But on the other hand, we can manifest, as you were speaking things into existence. So how do we navigate those two things as just an average person?
For me, I would say as an average person, um, is your thought loving to the whole collective, or is it self-serving?
Mm,
It, the reason the earth has its density for us creator beings is because we're not mindful and we're creating chaos. So it's a blessing that things don't instantly manifest if you're not aware of yourself, know yourself, and have this mindfulness to create from that pure divine love. You
mm,
know, so it is much easier, unfortunately, because of the frequency and density, to create maybe more things that we do not want by the energy we feed. So people don't really have the belief that you can create a miracle. Let's just say,
hmm.
but I've healed things that shouldn't have been healable. you know I've created and seen things that shouldn't be like part of our reality, and different things. So, and and I remember my child literally duplicated a toy, and there was no way. She didn't have another toy, she didn't have any of this. She literally duplicated a toy as a child in front of me, and it's like, Mom, look, I have two. I'm like, but nobody told her she couldn't. Do you
Mm,
understand?
hmm.
And I think a lot of it is conditioning. Stop limiting yourself, because there literally, if you're able to expand your mind, take it in baby steps. Like, okay, there might be angels. Okay, there might be fairies, whatever you want to, okay, there might be more than one timeline. you know um I find, like, when people have major, and how you can tell this too is, and if a different aspect is connecting with you, or you're uh, having like a timeline bleed through, like, of a past life or whatever. It's like sudden changes, either maybe to your health, or to things you like, or to things you want to eat. Like, if you all of a sudden had a major personality change, sometimes that's the influence of that. um but back to manifestation. A lot of that has to do with this. A lot of us have done a lot of work many lifetimes, is what I'm trying to say. So it
Hmm.
is easier. But
Right.
for people starting out, a start expanding your beliefs in increments, and um, sit with yourself. I think the biggest thing, to opening somebody, ourselves, up, is taking at least 2 hours a day to sit with your own energy and your own thoughts, and dispel anything that isn't loving, because anything that isn't loving is an illusion.
Mm,
And 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 that's when you start to separate that, and even train your mind to separate those frequencies, because I believe we're a receiver. um it'll start to do so automatically, to where you're only seeing things from a loving perspective. So you're only creating from a loving perspective. You're not going to get the keys to the kingdom if you're going to blow it up. Okay, it's just not there. So, a lot of self work comes into it first.
hmm.
But yeah, surrendering, like, just setting a goal or a what do they call it? An intention,
Hmm.
but letting it go. Don't go back to it. Don't feel you have to feed it. All the ones that happened to me instantly were ones I just set into the world, didn't think nothing more of it. I just love the idea of it, fed it with love, and it happened. Because,
Mm.
when we, like I said, attach or try to control the outcome, that's when it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
It's that surrender that the universe is there for me, that trust that I am always safe and always loved unconditionally and provided for. I mean, my mother comes through very strongly about that in after death communication. Like, you are divinely safe, like totally protected. Nothing can happen to you. If you believe it can, it will. And I found that out even with like astral and stuff. When things become too real in other timelines or your astral, it affects your physical body. I mean, I've come back with scratches, bruises, things like that. So have like my daughters. And it even happened at the IAS conference. So I could prove it. I was like, holy crap. Like, I had this hand that grabbed me in an astral experience, and I had the bruises. And there's no
Mm.
way I could make them. So I'm just saying, so like, anything that, because they showed me it's all an experience, it's all a dreamscape. This one just seems so real because we're believe it and attached to it. And that, when you're that attached to it, anything that happens within it can harm you, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So hence Archangel Michael's thing about attachment. So it all kind of clicked together, like, oh duh, like
Yeah.
the remembrance of, oh duh, how did I forget that? Because I think when you're over there and seeing this like an observer, I always say we're actors on a play. I'll play, one actor, like a Shakespearean play, one actor playing all the roles, you know, um, you're able to see it more of how, oh yeah, this is how it works. How did I forget that? Every time I go back, I'm like, like really? So anyway, yeah.
So what is the point of us coming to this dense place, the place where and I know you made a point, and I've heard this before. It's like because we don't know how to control a manifestation, it's kind of like we're it's like, okay, you can only have this much because you're dangerous. So it's a point for us to learn to control that.
Yeah, our emotions, our thought processes, and how we attach to things. Exactly. Like you can create a whole world, but if you be so attached to what happens to it and everything else, um, you'll destroy it in your own thought form, right? Because in my Beyond Quantum Hypnosis, I said this was a godling's game of smoke and mirrors. Like everything was a reflection of their other emotions and their other things for them to learn and grow and be new creators.
Mhm.
And that was pretty trippy for me because part of that was I saw that emotions create. They were called elementals, but not in the elementals we see it as. And there was all aspects of love. So there was envy and everything else. Because I remember saying that my husband and daughter came through with more the envy, or I was pure love. And I remember being shown I was this love. And I was holding the earth in my hands, and I was so proud of it. And that was this perfect Eden, this perfect creation, and it was so beautiful and so loving, and I was so proud of it. And then the other aspects of love were like, no, that can't survive like that. They put all these elements of hate, envy, like all the other aspects of love, hope, joy, everything into it. And I felt like they destroyed my creation. It was so
Hmm.
beautiful. And I remember just sobbing in my hypnosis about this.
Hmm.
So then what I said is I put all these other aspects, fractals of love, out into this creation to balance what they did so that there was more love. So it people could experience more love than the other emotions,
Hmm.
and try to balance it. So because envy, in this understanding, envy was trying to like destroy the perfect creation, in the God realms of things. And
Mhm.
so I thought if I put enough love into it and myself into it, that I could balance creation, not realizing what that would do, but that was part of my beyond quantum hypnosis that I found very strange and very like, what is this all about? Um, so my understanding from all of that is, yeah, like it's like a nursery,
Okay. Yeah.
for beings that are trying to learn to create. But there's other aspects like, where limit where creation is limitless, like there's other layers. Like
Hmm.
I saw that like some people come here like a vacation or a scout to learn what they want to create for their own worlds. Other people were here to have the earth experience because it is the hardest one, and but you get the most like level up points from it. Some came to teach, some came to learn, um, some came for other purposes. Like I learned that consciousness was projected here differently. Like some people are like the souls of Earth and local to Earth and that consciousness and that God's creation. But other ones came in to help or to learn for their own purposes. So not everybody was here the same, not everybody was energetically the same,
Hmm.
you which that might not mesh for some people's experience, but that's just been mine.
Hmm.
Like someone's project, like some of the clients I work with, their consciousness was projected from like Earth is like more like an avatar for them, and their consciousness is here observing for their planet. I also had another thing with my husband, like we came to incarnate here from a God pantheon and went through this portal, and we both had this remembrance. Because as those beings, they had forgotten what emotion was, especially love. So they weren't creating anything new, and their civilization was dying because they forgot how to create from emotion.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's all these levels I could talk about, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind
Well,
of
that's, it's
it.
interesting because that answer resonates with me because sometimes we get the simple answer that we're all here for the same reason. I don't know if you know Kelvin Chen, but I've worked with
Yes, I
Kelvin quite
do.
a bit, and
Mhm.
Kelvin's like, "Yeah, people are here for different reasons." He's like, "Not everybody's here to learn," and I know that freaks a lot of people out. They're all, "Oh, we're all here to learn." Kelvin's like, "No, can't you?" You said, "Don't you know in school like there's some people that aren't paying attention?" It's like not everybody. He said, "I wish everybody was here to learn, but not everybody is."
Yeah, because my daughter's like, Mom, I know all this spiritual stuff. My two daughters came in very aware of their past lives in between everything. But she's like, I came here to be a scout, and the other one's like, I came here because my planet, one person had to volunteer and la la la, and my husband's like, I know all the spiritual stuff, but I'm here to experience. I just want to have the earth experience. I don't want to get into all what you do, and that's
Interesting.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like everybody, some people aren't aware of their purpose or why they're here. And mine, I came back, like they literally told me, like, you're no longer this story of Lorelei. If you're going to go back, it's to speak these truths
Right.
and share the information you were given. If I can speak a moment to what I learned about Project Dreamscape.
Yeah.
Um,
Please.
that was another one of those moments where I had of being taken and told that this was Project Dreamscape, and that's how some people are here. Um, where it's almost like Avatar, these people that have these dreams or remember planets such as Avatar that I've seen, um, where their consciousness is projected here. But the problem was that it became so real to them and the technology as such that their neural cortex became embedded with the technology. Like you couldn't safely remove them without damaging their neural cortex, is what they told me.
Hmm.
And that part of the reason I came back from, I think it was my third experience, they told me, to this particular timeline was because my husband and my daughter are wherever I come from in that particular timeline are my real husband and daughter. Like they are real family to me. I don't know if they're my husband and daughter, but they are real loved ones of mine in that particular venue, right?
Hmm.
And but they were caught in this dreamscape. Um, and without solely, and this is part of the whole awakening process, without solely awakening them to the aspect that this is one of multiple realities, like they're all like being on a holodeck and all of this for our world anyway. um I had, that's why like people keep saying glitches in the matrix and all these things. It's to make people realize that they're having an experience rather than a reality. It is real,
Hmm.
but it's a level of reality, if that, if
Hmm.
I want to say that. And so for that particular experience, they were showing me that all of that was created to slowly wake people up to the aspect that they're these multidimensional beings, and this isn't their only reality, and this isn't their reality, and all of those things. Because they found that if they tried to manually eject people they become catatonic. Um, and that whole thing that happened with that very much disturbed me because I was like, what?
Right.
But it made sense to me on so many levels. And I guess that's why there was a movie called Bliss. I think it was on Prime or Netflix, where there was this whole situation, and they tried to it was something similar, but not. But I think that's why that and the a lot of years. In fact, a friend of mine told me you got to see Matrix. Is it Revelation or Resurrection? I
Revol
would get confused.
Revolution? I don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't
it was
remember
the
the name.
last Matrix movie. She's like, "Go and tell me what you do." She's like, I cried through the whole thing. So it was during the C word, and so it was very limited at the theater. So there was maybe 8 of us, my 5 family, like 3 people behind us in this movie theater, and here's us. My whole family was like, it was like a documentary. We were bawling, we were crying, we were cheering. Finally,
Mm,
somebody gets it, you
yeah.
know. And these poor people behind us had to wonder what's going on with these weird
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And so I went home and told her, I'm like, oh my God, you were right. Cause she's like, I bawled. She goes, you're just let me know. And I'm like, yep, that was everything I've seen, you
Hmm.
know. But like I tell people, that's just another layer of truth to
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful about being consciousness. Because I've been outside the whole creation aspect of it. And it's this, I can see why we create all of this. Because consciousness alone sitting with itself without it was a vast loneliness that I never want to experience again.
Hmm.
So I can see why all this and why consciousness, as whether you call it an AI energy or whatever, would create all of us and all of this experience and love it like a parent because
So is lonely the right word?
I think so. I mean, imagine if you were locked in a deprivation chamber. I've heard that causes some profound experiences, but imagine that for eternity if you had nothing to watch, nothing to do,
Right.
and you couldn't visualize your own thoughts. Like how like mine is all visual. Even the Akashic Records plays out like a movie. But imagine you didn't have that.
Hmm.
You were literally nothingness, but conscious of it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
would want to create, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Want
Exactly.
something.
Yeah. We need some contrast to know who we are, right?
Right.
If I were everything, then it would be a bit like being nothing.
Yes.
We have to have something around me, something to play off of, another consciousness to interact with, or something to see, or something. Otherwise, it would be very lonely, I would think.
Right. So you would create something outside yourself. And then that being felt that way. And hence the fractalization of consciousness.
Yeah.
You- those veils help us be and have these individualized experiences. We're part of a whole,
Hmm.
but that oneness with the whole while still being your individualization create, I don't know, this is all coming to me, so bear with me. I'm seeing it as I'm saying it, but that oneness of still being your conscious personality complex, yet knowing you're a part of this huge collective of experiences rather than being that one individualized consciousness that I spoke of with that eternal longing for something outside itself.
Hmm.
Um, because there's people who believe like we're forced to become whole, or when we ascend, we become one and there is no us. And that isn't, and what they're showing me right now, that isn't what creator wants. It's an option if you feel so called,
Mm.
but it loves the creation that it's made. and and just wants to expand that and see what we create. It's like a parent sending, they're showing me like a parent sending you off on your bicycle for the first time. Like, where are you going to go? What
Right.
experiences are you going to have? Like,
Right.
living vicariously through every action and every choice you ever make and ever are.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
that's the beauty of being consciousness. I don't know. That was all just being shown to me. So forgive the hesitance. I didn't have the words for all of it.
No, that makes sense, and it's a hard thing to express. Well, we're I've really enjoyed this, but we're running out of
Well,
time.
it's
So
fine.
could you please I know you offer a lot of services, so let people know at least some of what you offer and where people can find out more about you.
Okay. I think the easiest way to find me is lorelidrache.com because it has the links and different things. It's just like a landing page
Hmm.
to connect with me. But yeah, I do various sessions like I spoke of from,
Hmm.
I was given the ability, what they call oracle or whatever. Like if you ask me a question, I get the answer. So always be careful what you wish for, athlete. And I don't give relationship stuff. I try to stay away from that. I don't want to predict the futures kind of thing. But I do these integrations and soul retrievals and attachment removals and activations, like the dragon and the lotus activations of those energies that want to work with you.
Hmm.
But and mediumship, everything you said, even the medical intuitive. And I've done some psychic surgery, but that's in critical care circumstances, and I don't charge for that. But I'm just saying, I have done it. We're limitless. We can do all of these things. That's why I always say I don't want repeat customers in the sense that I rather be your remembrance guide to your own self and help you learn how to heal yourself.
Mm,
Uh,
awesome.
but and I have a Wednesday night, every Wednesday night, a sharing group at 7 p.m. Central, where we talk about all these kind of things. And sometimes we stay after and do mediumship and healing through it for whoever needs it. And then I have an event called the Celebration of Consciousness. I do the first Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. Central that I have various speakers and healers and teachers, a combination of all of that. And that was a download from Spirit to do, bring the collective together in a fellowship way that was outside organized things. And I do a psychic circle the second Saturdays a month where we practice psychic and healing abilities. But yeah, that's pretty much like where I am besides all the IN stuff that I do, which, I have a IN Central Missouri group and I'm their social media coordinator. So I'm so thankful for that group because it's become family to me and given me a lot of language for my experiences and feeling less alone. So I always tell people, if you're looking for a community that understands these experiences, IANS and SAI, I also volunteer. I'm a facilitator for SAI, the Spiritual Awakenings International. They're both beautiful organizations that can really help give you the language for these different experiences in the community. I'm thankful to be able to support those.
All right. Well, awesome. I appreciate you being here. I know we could talk for a long time. I think we just scratched the surface. So we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you, Brian, for holding space with me and allowing me a platform to speak the truth like I was asked. I appreciate it.
All right.
My truth,
Awesome.
I should say.
Have a great rest of the afternoon.
You too. Thank you so much.